Maya Johnson sat alone at a corner table in the massive library of Nexus Prime. The space station was bigger than most cities on Earth, spinning slowly through the darkness around a distant planet. Students from dozens of different alien worlds came here to learn, and the library was always busy with the sound of strange voices speaking in languages Maya was still learning. She kept her head down, focused on the glowing screen in front of her. Her research project on alien biology was due next week, and she needed every minute to finish it. The information was fascinating but complex. Each alien species had evolved differently, developing unique strengths and weaknesses that made them perfectly suited to their homeworlds. Maya was 19 years old, average height for a human female with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard student uniform that all academy members used. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything other than a typical exchange student from Earth. That was exactly how she preferred it. The peaceful quiet of the library was broken by heavy footsteps approaching her table. Maya did not look up immediately, but she could hear the distinctive sound of clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. She knew what was coming. She had been expecting this moment for weeks. Zekthor appeared at her table like a mountain of muscle and scales. The Draknari stood over 7 feet tall, his reptilian body covered in thick armor-like skin that could stop most weapons. His yellow eyes glowed with predatory intelligence, and his mouth was filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Everything about him screamed danger to the primitive parts of most species' brains. Behind Zekthor stood his usual group of followers, 3 Kragan warriors with their massive frames and 4 arms each, 2 Vorthak hunters with their insect-like features and clicking mandibles. They formed a half-circle around Maya's table, blocking her escape routes. Other students in the library noticed what was happening and quickly moved away from the area. Maya continued reading her screen as if nothing had changed. She turned a page of digital text with calm precision, her finger moving across the surface, with steady control. This lack of reaction seemed to annoy Zekthor, whose crest of spines along his head began to rise in irritation. The Draknari had built his reputation over 3 years at the academy by targeting students he considered weak. Humans were among his favorite victims because they appeared so fragile compared to most other species. Their soft skin looked like it would tear easily. Their small size made them seem helpless against larger predators. Most importantly, they usually ran away or submitted when confronted with overwhelming force. Zekthor had never met a human who refused to be intimidated. "You sit in my seat, soft skin," Zekthor said in broken standard language, the universal tongue used throughout the galaxy. His voice was a low growl that made nearby students flinch. "Move now, or I make you sorry." Maya looked up from her work, for the first time since he arrived. Her brown eyes met his yellow gaze without any sign of fear or submission. She studied his face with the calm interest of someone examining an interesting specimen in a laboratory. "I was here first," she said, in a quiet voice that somehow carried clearly through the sudden silence of the library. "There are plenty of other seats available. You can find one that suits you better." The library became completely quiet. Even the soft humming sounds made by the crystalline beings stopped. Students throughout the large space turned to watch what was happening. Some began recording with their personal devices, sensing that something unusual was about to occur. No one had ever spoken back to Zekthor in such a direct manner. The Draknari was known throughout the station as someone who got his way through violence and intimidation. Stories of his brutality had spread among the student population like a disease, creating fear wherever he went. Zekthor's followers moved closer to the table, their own weapons and natural armaments becoming visible. The Kragan flexed their 4 arms, each one capable of crushing bone. The Vorthak extended their razor-sharp claws and began making threatening clicking sounds with their mouths. Maya remained seated, organizing her research materials with the same calm efficiency she had shown all evening. She picked up a fallen stylus and placed it in its proper position. She aligned her data tablets in a neat row. She took a sip from her water container and set it down exactly where it had been before. Her complete lack of reaction to the threat seemed to confuse and anger Zekthor even more. His crest rose higher, and the scales along his arms began to change color. shifting from dark green to a more aggressive red pattern that warned of impending violence. Human female thinks she brave, Zekthor snarled, leaning down so his massive head was closer to Maya's eye level. His breath smelled like rotting meat, and saliva dripped from his teeth. Draknari crush weak things like you. Your whole species nothing but prey animals pretending to be people. Other students began backing away from the confrontation, forming a wide circle around the table. Some were whispering to each other in their native languages, placing bets on how long the human would last before she either ran away or was seriously injured. Maya stood up slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. Even at her full height, she barely reached the middle of Zekthor's chest. The size difference was comical to most observers. She looked like a child standing next to an adult, or more accurately, like prey facing a predator. But something about the way she moved made several of the more intelligent aliens in the library step back even further. The ethereal beings, known for their telepathic abilities, began emanating waves of unease through their psychic connections. They sensed something that the others could not yet see. Maya brushed an imaginary piece of dust from her uniform and looked up at Zekthor with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the encounter. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying an edge that made the universal translator struggle to convey the full meaning. "Before this goes any further," she said, "I think you should know something important about humans that apparently was not included in your species intelligence reports." The library fell into complete silence as Maya's words hung in the air like a challenge. Zekthor's followers began moving in a slow circle around her table, their predatory instincts taking control. The three Kragan warriors cracked their knuckles with sounds like breaking bones. The two Vorthak hunters made clicking noises with their mandibles, a sound their species used before attacking prey. Maya remained perfectly still in the center of their circle, showing no sign of panic or fear. She watched each of them with the calm attention of someone studying animals in a zoo. Her breathing stayed steady and controlled. Her hands hung relaxed at her sides. Everything about her posture suggested she was completely unaware of the danger surrounding her. This strange behavior made Zekthor even more angry. In his experience, prey animals either ran away immediately or froze in terror when faced with superior predators. Maya was doing neither. She was acting like she belonged exactly where she was, as if 7 deadly aliens circling her was a normal part of her day. Word of the confrontation spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Students in other parts of Nexus Prime began receiving messages about the human who was actually standing up to the infamous Draknari bully. Some hurried to the library to witness the event in person. Others started placing bets through the underground, gambling networks run by Ferengi merchants in the lower decks. The ethereal beings in the library began backing away further, their translucent forms shimmering with distress. Their telepathic senses were picking up something wrong about the situation, though they could not identify exactly what was making them uncomfortable. Several other psychically sensitive species followed their lead, creating a wider empty space around the confrontation. Zekthor decided it was time to end this embarrassing situation. No prey animal should be allowed to show such disrespect in front of an audience. His reputation as the station's most feared bully was at stake. If word spread that a small human female had defied him without consequences, other students might start getting similar ideas. "You think you smart, soft-skin?" Zekthor growled, his voice getting louder with each word. "You think your weak species can stand against Draknari might? My people conquered 12 star systems while yours still lived in caves on your pathetic little world." Maya tilted her head slightly as if considering his words with genuine interest. "Actually, humans stopped living in caves about 40,000 years ago," she said in the same quiet voice she had used throughout the encounter. "We spent most of our development fighting each other, which turned out to be excellent practice for fighting everyone else." The casual way she corrected his insult seemed to surprise Zekthor. Most students either cowered in fear or tried to appease bullies with apologies and submission. Maya was treating him like a student who had given a wrong answer in class. "Your father is War Chief Mekthor of the 7th Talon Fleet, correct?" Maya continued, her tone remaining conversational despite the growing tension in the room. The one who conquered the Helios system by bombarding it from orbit? Zekthor's eyes widened in surprise. How did this random human know about his family, history? The 7th Talon Fleet's campaigns were military records that most civilians never bothered to study. 2.3 billion civilian casualties in that operation, Maya said, as if reciting facts from a textbook. The Galactic Council classified it as a war crime, but the Draknari Empire claimed it was a legitimate military action because the planet's government refused to surrender immediately. The Draknari's crest flared higher, and the red coloring in his scales became more intense. "My father is greatest warrior in Draknari history," he snarled. "You dare speak his name with your filthy prey mouth?" Maya nodded thoughtfully. He was certainly effective. Brutal but effective. The orbital bombardment strategy eliminated organized resistance in less than 6 hours. Very efficient from a purely military perspective. Her calm analysis of his father's most famous victory confused Zekthor. She was not insulting War Chief Mekthor or calling him evil. She was discussing his tactics like a military historian examining ancient battles. This was not how prey animals were supposed to react when threatened. "I have studied many of your species' military campaigns," Maya continued, still standing in the center of the circle formed by Zekthor's followers. "Your people are excellent at conventional warfare, superior technology, overwhelming force, psychological intimidation through demonstrations of brutality. It works well against most civilizations." She paused to take another sip from her water container, as if they were having a pleasant academic discussion instead of a life-threatening confrontation. "The interesting thing about humans," Maya said, setting down her water and looking directly at Zekthor, "is that we have never fought a conventional war in our entire history. Every single conflict our species has ever engaged in has been what other civilizations would consider irregular warfare." Some of the more intelligent aliens in the growing crowd began to look uncomfortable. The Zephyrian scholars, known for their vast knowledge of military history, started whispering among themselves in their musical language. They seemed to be sharing information that was making them increasingly nervous. Maya began walking in a slow circle, moving with fluid grace that made Zekthor's followers shift position to keep her in sight. For the first time since the confrontation began, they found themselves reacting to her movements instead of controlling the situation. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," Maya explained, her voice carrying clearly through the silent library. "We did not develop claws or fangs or armor plating like most predator species. Instead, we learned to chase our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We became very good at never giving up." She stopped walking and faced Zekthor directly. "We also became tool users earlier than most species, problem solvers, pattern recognition specialists. But most importantly, we developed something that makes us extremely dangerous to bullies." Zekthor leaned forward, his massive frame towering over the small human. "What thing, soft skin?" Maya smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. It was not a pleasant expression. Several species had evolutionary warnings hardwired into their genetic memory about that particular facial expression, even though they had never encountered it before. "Spite," she said simply. "Humans are spite-driven creatures. We will go to incredible lengths to make bullies regret their choices." Maya's smile had an immediate effect on the aliens surrounding her. The Kragan warriors took an involuntary step backward, their forearms tensing as if preparing for combat. The Vorthak hunters stopped their clicking sounds and began making high-pitched whining noises that indicated distress in their species. Even Zekthor found himself fighting the urge to retreat from the small human female. The crowd of watching students had grown larger, with beings from dozens of different species now filling the library. Some floated near the ceiling using anti-gravity devices, while others clung to the walls with natural adhesive abilities. The betting networks were working overtime as odds shifted wildly based on the strange turn the confrontation had taken. Maya gestured toward the nearest wall display, which flickered to life at her command. The library's computer systems responded to her access codes, bringing up what appeared to be a standard student profile. But as the information began loading, it became clear that this was not the basic academic record that most students carried. Her name appeared first. Maya Johnson, age 19, origin Earth, Sol system. So far, everything looked normal. Then more lines of text began scrolling across the screen in multiple languages. Standard Galactic, Draknari, Kragan, Vorthak, Zephyrian, and dozens of others that most students could not even identify. Academic focus, xenobiology and comparative warfare studies. Previous education, United Earth Military Academy, Advanced. Combat School, Psychological Operations Division, Strategic Analysis Institute. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder as more information appeared on the display. Military decorations began listing themselves in neat rows. Combat certifications in 17 different categories. Survival training completions for hostile environments ranging from Arctic wastelands to volcanic hellscapes. Hand-to-hand combat instructor ratings for multiple species. Zekthor stared at the scrolling information with growing confusion and alarm. This was not the profile of a typical exchange student. This was the record of a trained military operative, with extensive experience in warfare and combat operations. Maya watched his reaction with scientific interest, as if observing how a test subject responded to new stimuli. I should probably explain something that your intelligence services missed when they compiled their reports on human capabilities, she said, her voice remaining conversational despite the tension in the room. More information continued appearing. On the wall display, training completions in 38 different martial arts systems, weapons qualifications ranging from primitive blade weapons to advanced plasma rifles, psychological warfare specialist certification, counterinsurgency expert rating, hostile species interaction protocols. The human government has a program called the Military Exchange Initiative, Maya continued, beginning to walk in a slow circle around Zekthor. They send specially trained personnel to educational institutions throughout the galaxy to study alien psychology, biology, and warfare techniques. Zekthor found himself turning to keep Maya in sight, a behavior that reversed their original predator-prey dynamic. For the first time in the confrontation, he was the one reacting to her movements instead of controlling the situation. The goal is to understand how different species think and fight, Maya explained, her tone taking on the quality of a lecture given to military students. This knowledge helps us prepare for potential conflicts, but it also teaches us how to interact peacefully with civilizations that might otherwise see humans as threats. The display continued showing her credentials. Specialist training in alien anatomy and physiology. Expert certification in pressure point manipulation for 43 different species. Advanced interrogation resistance training. Diplomatic protocol instruction for first contact scenarios. Several of the more intelligent aliens in the crowd began backing away as they processed what they were seeing. The Zephyrian scholars were frantically consulting their portable computers, cross-referencing Maya's credentials with their databases of military organizations throughout the galaxy. Of course, the program has other benefits, Maya said, stopping her circular movement to face Zekthor directly. It allows us to identify potential problems before they become serious threats to human interests. Individuals who might cause trouble for our people in the future. She gestured toward the wall display, which now showed detailed psychological profiles and behavior analysis reports. Charts and graphs illustrated patterns of aggression, intimidation tactics, and victim selection criteria. At the center of it all was a detailed file labeled with Zekthor's name and identification number. I have been observing you for 3 months, Maya said, her voice dropping to a quieter level that somehow made it more menacing. Studying your methods, your psychology, your weaknesses, learning everything about how you think and how you operate. Zekthor's followers began to realize that they were not in control of this situation. The human female they had surrounded was not trapped. She was exactly where she wanted to be. They were the ones who had walked into a carefully prepared trap. Maya accessed another section of the display, showing detailed anatomical charts of Draknari physiology. Pressure points were marked in red, vulnerable areas highlighted in yellow, and critical nerve clusters outlined in blue. Similar charts appeared for Kragan and Vorthak anatomy. each one showing exactly where their species could be disabled or incapacitated with minimal effort. Humans are really good at finding weaknesses, Maya said, studying the charts with professional interest. We have to be. We did not evolve natural weapons or armor, so we learned to be creative. We became experts at using the minimum amount of force to achieve maximum results. The Kragan warriors looked at their anatomical chart with growing horror. Points along their forearms were marked as places where a single precise strike could cause complete paralysis. Nerve clusters in their necks were identified as targets that could render them unconscious in seconds. The Vorthak hunters were equally disturbed by their chart, which showed how their insect-like exoskeletons had specific weak points that could be exploited by someone with the right knowledge and training. Their clicking sounds changed to a higher pitch that indicated extreme distress. Maya turned back to Zekthor, whose reptilian face had gone pale beneath his scales. The interesting thing about bullies, she said, is that they are actually quite predictable once you understand their psychology. They rely on their reputation and intimidation factor more than their actual fighting abilities. She pointed to a section of his psychological profile that analyzed his behavior patterns. You select targets based on perceived weakness. You escalate confrontations gradually to test resistance levels. You rely on audience effects to maximize the psychological impact of your victories. Most importantly, you avoid fights where the outcome is uncertain. Zekthor realized that he had made a fundamental error in judgment. This was not a random encounter with a weak prey animal. This was a planned confrontation with a trained predator who had been studying him like a laboratory specimen. Maya smiled. Again, and this time even more aliens fled the library entirely. The silence in the library stretched like a tight wire ready to snap. Zekthor stared at the anatomical charts displayed on the wall, his yellow eyes moving from one marked pressure point to another. Each red dot represented a place where Maya could disable him with a single precise strike. Each blue line showed nerves that could be damaged to cause pain or paralysis. The charts were detailed enough to serve as targeting guides for someone trained in combat. Maya stood in the center of the circle formed by his followers, but the dynamic had completely changed. She was no longer surrounded prey waiting to be attacked. She was a spider in the middle of her web, watching flies that had trapped themselves without realizing their danger. The Kragan warriors looked between their own anatomical chart and Maya's calm face, trying to understand how a creature half their size could pose any threat to their armored bodies. The chart showed weak points in their four-armed structure that they had never known existed, places where their own strength could be turned against them with the right leverage and timing. The Vorthak hunters were equally disturbed by what they saw. Their insect-like exoskeletons, which they had always considered perfect natural armor, were marked with dozens of vulnerable spots. Maya had identified every joint, every gap, every place where their biology created weaknesses instead of strengths. Zekthor tried to regain control of the situation through pure intimidation. He drew himself up to his full height, making his already massive frame appear even larger. His crest rose to its maximum extension, and the red warning coloration in his scales became brighter and more aggressive. "Human female thinks she clever," he snarled, his voice echoing through the quiet library. "Show pretty pictures on wall, tell stories about training. But Zekthor still bigger, still stronger, still have claws that tear soft human flesh like paper." Maya nodded as if agreeing with his assessment. "You are bigger and stronger," she said in her calm, steady voice. "Those are significant advantages in most combat situations. Your claws could indeed cause serious damage to human tissue if they made contact." Her reasonable tone seemed to encourage Zekthor, who began advancing toward her with predatory confidence. His followers tightened their circle, cutting off any possible escape routes. The watching crowd pressed closer to get a better view of what they expected to be a brief and violent conclusion to the confrontation. "The problem with relying on size and strength," Maya continued, not moving from her position as the massive Draknari approached, "is that it only works when you can actually hit your target. Humans learned a long time ago that speed and precision usually beat raw power." She gestured toward another section of the wall display, which now showed combat footage from various human conflicts throughout history. Ancient warriors using quick strikes to defeat larger opponents. Modern soldiers using technique and timing to overcome superior numbers. The recordings played without sound, but the message was clear. Your species evolved for open combat against enemies of similar size and strength, Maya explained, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher instructing students. Direct confrontation using overwhelming force. It works well against most opponents, but humans specialize in asymmetric warfare. Zekthor was close enough now that Maya had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The size difference was enormous, making her look like a child facing an adult. But something about her posture and expression made several of the more experienced warriors in the crowd shift uncomfortably. "You want to know something interesting about human psychology?" Maya asked, looking up at the towering alien without any sign of fear. "We actually perform better under pressure. The more dangerous a situation becomes, the more focused and capable we get. It is a survival trait we developed during our evolution." The display changed to show stress response charts comparing different species. Most aliens showed decreased performance when faced with life-threatening situations. Humans showed the opposite pattern, with their capabilities actually increasing as danger levels rose. Zekthor raised one massive clawed hand, preparing to end this embarrassing confrontation with a display of raw Draknari power. His followers, tensed, ready to watch their leader demonstrate why his species ruled through strength and fear. "Before you do something you will regret for the rest of your life," Maya said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Let me share one final piece of information about humans that your intelligence services definitely missed." She smiled, and this time the expression was different from her previous smiles. This one carried no warmth, no humor, no trace of civilization. It was the smile of a predator that had been playing with its food and was ready to feed. "We do not just study our enemies," Maya said, her quiet words somehow carrying clearly through the entire library. "We practice on them." Zekthor hesitated, his raised hand stopping in mid-motion. Something in Maya's tone made him reconsider his planned attack. For the first time in years, the Draknari bully felt a cold sensation in his stomach that he did not immediately recognize as fear. Maya began moving then, circling around him with fluid grace that made his followers turn to track her movement. She was no longer standing still and waiting for his attack. She was positioning herself, choosing her ground, preparing for combat with the calm efficiency of a professional soldier. "The thing about bullies," she said as she moved, "is that they have never really learned how to fight. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force against weaker opponents. When they finally meet someone who fights back, they discover that they do not actually know how to handle real resistance." The anatomical charts on the wall display began highlighting specific pressure points in sequence, as if showing a planned attack pattern. Red dots appeared and disappeared in a rhythm that suggested precise timing and coordination. Zekthor found himself turning in place, trying to keep Maya in sight as she continued her circular movement. His followers were doing the same thing, and suddenly they realized that their coordinated formation had dissolved into confused individual reactions. Maya stopped moving and faced Zekthor directly. The distance between them was exactly right for what she had planned. Close enough for speed, far enough for maneuvering room. Perfect positioning for a human-trained combat specialist. "Your move," she said simply. Zekthor made his decision. The humiliation had gone on long enough. No matter what tricks this human thought she had, he was still a Draknari warrior, with the strength to crush her bones with his bare hands. His father had conquered star systems. His people ruled through power and fear. One small soft skin could not change that reality. He lunged forward with all the speed his powerful legs could provide. His claws extended to their full length, ready to grab Maya and end this embarrassing situation once and for all. The movement was faster than most species could track, a blur of scales and razor-sharp weapons that had defeated dozens of opponents in the past. Maya was not there. She had moved at the last possible second, stepping aside with liquid grace that made Zekthor's charge carry him past her completely. His momentum was too great to stop, and his claws closed on empty air where she had been standing just moments before. Before Zekthor could recover his balance, Maya struck. Her hand moved, with surgical precision, hitting a specific point behind his left knee with exactly the right amount of force. The pressure point she targeted was clearly marked on the anatomical chart still displayed on the wall, highlighted in red as a location that would cause immediate muscle failure. Zekthor's leg buckled instantly. The massive Draknari crashed to the floor with a sound like a falling tree, his 7-foot frame hitting the metal deck plates hard enough to shake the entire library section. He tried to push himself back up, but his left leg refused to respond properly. Muscles that had carried him through countless battles were no longer under his control. Targeted nerve disruption, Maya explained to the stunned audience, her voice carrying the calm tone of a medical instructor describing a procedure. Temporary paralysis of the major muscle groups. The effect will last approximately 15 minutes, long enough for security to arrive if necessary. She stood over the fallen Draknari, hands clasped behind her back, like a professor giving a lecture. Her breathing was completely normal, showing no signs of stress or exertion from the brief physical encounter. Zekthor roared in rage and pain, trying to force his damaged leg to work through sheer willpower. His followers started moving toward Maya, but she raised one hand in a gesture that made them freeze in place. "I would not recommend that course of action," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "I have studied your anatomical weaknesses, as thoroughly as his. The results would be equally educational but significantly more embarrassing for you." The Kragan warriors looked at their four-armed bodies, then at the detailed charts on the wall showing exactly where they could be disabled. The Vorthak hunters clicked nervously, their compound eyes fixed on the pressure points marked along their exoskeletons. None of them moved to help their fallen leader. Maya turned her attention back to Zekthor, who was still struggling to regain his footing. "The interesting thing about bullies," she said, "is that their power comes entirely from the fear they create in others. Remove that fear, and they become just another problem with a simple solution." She walked around his prone form, staying just out of reach of his grasping claws. "You have spent 3 years terrorizing students on this station, building a reputation through violence and intimidation, making people afraid to walk the corridors alone or sit in the library without looking over their shoulders." The wall display changed to show incident reports from station security. Dozens of complaints about Zekthor's behavior, filed by students from multiple species. Reports of theft, assault, and psychological harassment that painted a clear picture of systematic bullying over an extended period. "The Academy administration has been building a case against you for months," Maya continued, her voice remaining calm and professional. "But they needed solid evidence and witness testimony. Students were too afraid to come forward because of your reputation for revenge against anyone who crossed you." More documents appeared on the display. Official complaints from the Zephyrian Scholars Council, formal protests from the Crystalline Embassy, requests for intervention from the parents of victimized students. All of them had been quietly building pressure for action against the Draknari bully. "However," Maya said, stopping her circuit around Zekthor to face him directly, "threatening a human military operative in front of multiple witnesses while being recorded by station security provides exactly the evidence they needed to take action." She gestured toward the ceiling, where small security cameras had been tracking the entire confrontation. Red lights indicated that everything had been recorded and transmitted to the station's central security system. Zekthor finally managed to struggle into a sitting position, his damaged leg still refusing to support his weight properly. "You planned this," he said, his voice hoarse with pain and growing realization. "You wanted me to attack you." Maya nodded. "I have been waiting for you to make a move against a human student for 3 months. When you finally targeted me, you provided the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that bullies are not as powerful as they pretend to be." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the library as station security forces arrived. A squad of armed guards in full tactical gear surrounded the area, their weapons trained on Zekthor and his followers. The security team was led by Commander Rodriguez, a human officer who looked like he had been hoping for this moment for a very long time. "Zekthor, of the 7th Talon Fleet," Commander Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying official authority. "You are under arrest for assault, battery, intimidation of students, and violation of the Nexus Prime Academy Charter. Your diplomatic immunity has been revoked by order of the Galactic Education Council. As the security team moved to restrain the fallen Draknari, Maya picked up her research materials and organized them with the same calm efficiency she had shown throughout the encounter. She shouldered her bag and prepared to leave the library as if nothing unusual had happened. "One more thing," she said, pausing to look down at Zekthor as the guards fitted him with restraints designed for his species. "I sent a full report of your activities to both the Earth Embassy and the Draknari Imperial Command. Humans protect their people, but your own government is not happy about having their military reputation damaged by the actions of a coward who picks fights with civilians." She walked toward the library exit, passing through the crowd of alien students who stepped aside to let her pass. Many of them stared at her with new respect and more than a little fear. The small human female had just dismantled the station's most feared bully, with a combination of intelligence, preparation, and precisely applied force. As Maya reached the exit, she turned back one final time. "By the way," she called out to the subdued crowd, "humans have a saying about bullies. We believe that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Today, we did something." The library doors closed behind her, leaving the alien students to process what they had witnessed and to spread the story throughout the galaxy. The soft-skinned species had revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined.